welcome to the Why on Earth Community Podcast. I'm your host, Aaron William Perry, and today we're visiting with a very special guest, Elaine Ingham, the world-renowned soil scientist and the founder and president of Soil Food Web. Hi, Elaine. Welcome.
Glad to be here. This is going to be fun, Aaron.
Yeah, I'm so thrilled we have this opportunity to chat with you, not only about the current understanding of the complexities in soil ecology, but also we're going to get a bit of a view from you on how this has evolved so much over the last few decades.
Well, it was slow at first. The first couple decades, I somewhat felt like a lone voice in the jungle or out there in the woods someplace, and people zooming by on their cars. Oh, that crazy lady! She thinks that microorganisms are important. She's so silly. She doesn't know anything. And then the slow but sure, as we started to show people that we can not use inorganic fertilizers. We don't need any of the herbicides and biocides and all of those things. They're not necessary. So with each of those areas seeing that sort of thing, starting to get more and more people to go down this pathway. And then the school has been in existence. So the Soil Food Web School has been in existence since 2019. And so over the years, we've gotten quite a few people trained, and they're out there making good money. So please come and join us. You don't have to deal with all those toxic materials, and you don't have to be putting poison on the food that you're going to eat.
Absolutely wonderful. And you have been such a pioneer and really avatar globally for this movement that's now well underway. Dr. Elaine Ingham uncovered the Soil Food Web nearly 4 decades ago and has been pioneering research about the Soil Food Web ever since. Widely recognized as the world's foremost soil biologist, she's passionate about empowering people to bring the soils in their communities back to life. Dr. Ingham's Soil Food Web approach has been used to successfully restore the ecological functions of soils on more than 5 million acres of farmland all over the world. The courses offered by her Soil Food Web school have been designed for people with or without a scientific background, making them accessible to individuals who wish to learn and to begin a meaningful and impactful career in an area that will help to secure the survival of humans and other species. She has a bachelor's in biology and chemistry from St. Olaf College, a master's in microbiology from Texas A&M University, and a PhD in microbiology from Colorado State University, just up the way here from where I am right now in Colorado. And of course, as mentioned, she is the founder and president of Soil Food Web and the Soil Food Web School. Elaine, it is such a pleasure to have this opportunity to visit with you and to share with folks not only the top tier importance and priority of soil stewardship planet-wide, but also, as I mentioned, glimpsing into how this entire scientific understanding has evolved so much over the course of your career. And I'd like to kick things off by asking you to share with us something you shared with me the other day that was so poignant, and I think speaks volumes about how we got into some of the pickles we're in right now on the planet. Can you describe back when you were in graduate school, the kind of aha discoveries you were making regarding soil microbiology and the present current situation a few decades ago in the academic arena and the industrial arena? who these people were and what their views were?
Yeah, it was well, I might back up a little bit and talk about my master's degree at Texas A&M, where the people who had beds of oysters, say, out in Galveston Bay, and every time the Navy ships up in Brazos River pulled the ship out of the water and sprayed all these toxic chemicals to kill the barnacles and kill all the things that were attached and digging holes in the bottom of their ships. You think about where does that toxic chemical that was instantaneously killing some pretty large organisms, that's going into the water, and we pretended as human beings that it didn't matter. It was going to get diluted soon. So don't worry, there's not a problem. Well, some 100 miles downstream, this stuff comes out into the Galveston Bay and kills the oysters in the bed. We went into what's the biology that was going on, exactly how, and I always have to ask that question of how does that work? Can't just say this, we know that there was a lot of toxic chemical in here and that's what killed the oysters. Well, it was a little more complex than that. And so if anybody wants to know, we can talk about it. But, coming to Colorado State University then, as finished up my master's degree in marine microbiology, and then moved on to Colorado State University and in soil, because there's so many more jobs when you're dealing with the soil than as compared to aquatic systems, marine systems around the United States. Way more money in growing food than harvesting oysters from the ocean. And when I got there, I sat down with my major professor. We kind of worked out, what does Elaine want to work on? What will be a reasonable topic for my degree? Come on. I love it when my brain kind of goes on.
Your doctorate, yeah?
Yeah, my doctorate. Thank you.
Yeah.
My PhD. So working through that. And at the end of kind of putting things together, where we were going to look for what were bacteria and fungi and protozoa and nematodes, what effect were they having on the plants growing in various conditions. So nobody had really looked at that before. Bacteria and fungi have been looked at as diseases, so we've got to kill them, right? The only good fungus is a dead fungus. Well, there's got to be some good there. If Mother Nature's going to put up with those microorganisms for billions of years and didn't kick them out of the way, there has to have been something good that Mother Nature was working on with those organisms. So I wanted to kind of look into all of those things in some way. And so my major professor, I have a call trying to come in right now, so we're going to have to do a little editing. Sorry.
No problem. You're getting interrupted.
Yeah, I am getting interrupted, and I know I can't touch that dial or you'll have to find me again. So, okay, now that's over and done with. So now my major professor and I, looking at this kind of approach, he said to me, and let me give you his name, Dr. Don Klein was my major professor. And he said, why don't you go around to all of the people who professors or higher in the university and ask them about whether your proposed PhD is going to be worthwhile. What should I add? What should I subtract? Those kinds of questions. So let's make sure that what I was doing was in style. So yes, we have the latest fashions, right? What are you working on? So I kind of went, okay, I guess I can do that. I don't really like approaching people I don't know and asking them to do something for me. That's a little hard for me, but it's like my major professor said so, so I'm gonna go do it. So called them all up, and there were about probably 10 to 12, maybe 14 professors that I was going to pick on. So the head of the Department of Soil Science, head of the Department of Crop Science, the head of the greenhouse people, and all of these different kind of soil was the most important thing to him, forestry. So gonna go around to all of those places and ask that question. And I figured I'd at least get some variation and somebody that would have some idea that these organisms were positive for the growth of plants, not just negative. So I went into the first one, sat down, talked about the what I wanted to do, and at the end, the guy, closed the container, the booklet that I had put together for this, and said to me, "This is a really bad idea. You shouldn't do this. Nobody will hire you once you're finished with 4 years of your PhD work. There's just no point. You're going to be fighting a battle because these organisms don't do anything to improve the growth of plants. It's we got to get rid of them all." And I was just astounded. So, okay, but that was the first one, right? I went to the second one, same thing in slightly different terms, and all of the various, and I always have to point out that they were all men, and that didn't help because they don't, they like to spray things that everything dies right away. You can see the effect right away, or at least that's what I thought. And when you go out with a nurturing sort of program, we're going to grow these things. We're going to make sure that it's only the good guys. How do you control the bad guys and keep them from growing? Well, it's really simple. If you pay any attention to Mother Nature and what she's doing out there, you understand almost immediately what is she using to control these populations of good guy versus bad guys? What are all of the things that these bacteria and fungi, protozoa and nematodes, what are the interactions? So that was, I finished up my PhD in 1981. So that gives you an idea of how old I am. So from there, I went to the University of Georgia. After that, I went to the University of, Oregon State University. I was a professor here at Oregon State for 15 years when I decided that I really needed to work more closely with the public, because that's where we've got to change all that land. We've got to convince everybody that we don't need to be worried about making money when you're growing in a biologically positive fashion. In fact, you'll make way more money if you use the biological approach as compared to the toxic chemical approach. First of all, in a biological approach, you don't have to buy those expensive chemicals. You don't have to buy the inorganic fertilizers. You've got more than enough nutrients cycling around in your soil, but you have to have soil, not dirt. And that's what we do when we perform catastrophic realignment of your soil. We kill all those beneficial bacteria and fungi and protozoa and nematodes and microarthropods and earthworms and enchytraeids and on and on and on. They're all destroyed. And those are the organisms that cycle nutrients and make them available to your plant. If you just grind apart some salts of, phosphate or potassium or magnesium or whatever, they're in a form that the plant can't take up. They have to be soluble. Well, if you just grind up a rock, is any part of that ground up rock soluble? Probably not, or at a very low level. So you've got to find a different way to make that material soluble. So how does that happen out in the real world? Well, the bacteria and the fungi are being fed by the exudates coming out of your root systems. And that plant knows precisely what it needs. And so it tells that in the form of, sugars and proteins and carbs and all kinds of different chemicals, but all ones that are food for your bacteria and fungi. So the bacteria and fungi, they come to that material, they eat it, and they get the enzymatic request that the plant needs this, that, or the other thing. And so they go and take their enzymes, which they have just been fed, so to make those enzymes, and they pull out of the silica bilayer of your sand, silt, clays, rocks, pebbles, parent material, boulders, all of those things. They pull those nutrients that your plant wants and put them inside their bodies. So the bacteria and fungi are protecting those foods, and they are now in an organic form. So your plant can take them up. Okay, great. So here come the bacteria and fungi, and they kind of go knock, knock, knock on the root system door and say, we got your delivery for you. And the plant goes, thank you very much. And over here on the side, she's putting out notice to the protozoa and the nematodes and the microarthropods to come and get their dinner because it's knocking on their door. So they come in, they eat bacteria and fungi. They never eat it all. But because the concentration of every single nutrient is much higher in the bacteria and in the fungi than the protozoa, nematodes, microarthropods, etc. need, there's always that excess that isn't taken up by the predators that eat the bacteria and fungi. So the soluble nutrient comes out, the plant goes, hey, thanks. And those nutrients, all of the nutrients that the plant requires. If there's still excess outside, the only thing that's going to happen to those soluble nutrients is a different bacterium and a different fungus is going to pick them up and grow faster. We never allow there to be where nutrients move through the soil and out into rivers and lakes and streams, and you lose. It's like when you look at inorganic fertilizers and you're going to put on an inorganic fertilizer, which is not soluble. So how can your plant take it up? Or very small concentrations. So, that not soluble material is going to be washed out of your soil, when your plant, here's another aspect to all of this. What keeps nutrients in the soil? Well, obviously bacteria and fungi, but what if you had other materials, some other organic material coming out of your plant? The plant doesn't need it, so it poops it out. Well, you never knew that plants pooped, huh? This is where we're trying to use speak to people in language they understand. And most people understand the concept of poop. It's a waste material for that plant. And if it's not taken up by the microorganisms, it's going to be washed out of the soil, especially something that's not available for these things to pick up and keep and hold. They're going to be lost, just like your sand, your silt, your clays, your rocks, your pebbles are going to be lost downhill too. Just depends on how rapidly is it raining. What's that problem? So how do you build soil so it doesn't allow that loss of nutrients? Well, you've got to build aggregates. And it is bacteria that build the microaggregates, little tiny guys that you have to have a microscope to see. And then fungi that make macroaggregates, all the big things bound around by the strands of hyphae. And in the insides of both the micro and the macro store water. So 50% of those aggregates are going to be filled with water. They keep the other 50% aerobic because we don't want any anaerobic things going on, because anaerobic conditions drop the pH in your soil and it kills your plants. Duh. So we want those aggregates to be present and hold on to water. So you want these bacteria and fungi moving down through your soil profile and building more and more and more structure as it goes. How far down can you get the roots of your plants? Well, it depends on your plant. Something that is annual usually doesn't put that much energy into its root system. So, it probably is going to be allowing, they'll build structure down to 15 to 25 feet. And if you've got that kind of ability to pull nutrients from all of that huge amount of the soil, you don't have to worry about your plant needing more nutrients or more of this or that or the other thing. So not only are these microorganisms building structure, so oxygen and water and your roots can go deep down into the soil. Who cares if you have a drought this summer? Not going to impact your plants at all, because we have all of these different things. And I've only touched on, like 3 out of the 12 benefits that your plant gets from having these organisms in the soil. So if you want to learn about the other 9 or 10, please go to our website, look over the information we have there. So it's what's the email address? You're going to have it written down.
Soilfoodweb.com.
Yes, that's what I was trying to think about. Great.
Yes.
Yep. This is what happens when you get old.
Well,
The search and locate function just is, well, it's slowing down like the rest of me. But, so sometimes I'm going to have to have you help me on what I'm trying to say now.
Well, yeah, happy to mention, Elaine, soilfoodweb.com. And of course, we'll have that listed in the show notes, along with some social media connection points where folks can connect in with you. And I mean, the search and locate function is kind of hilarious for you to mention, because you've very likely forgotten more about soil biology than most of the rest of us will ever learn. And, on the point of learning about soil biology, you have not only advanced the understanding and the both academic and professional horticultural, agricultural practices, but you've also influenced so many others in their work. And you were sharing with me the other day that your team has compiled the other scientific research and literature that cites your work. And you were telling me that it's somewhere around 10,000 scientists, which is, that's staggering. That is such a remarkable number of folks looking to your work, your pioneering work, for them to also do their part in advancing our understanding and hopefully our healing, regeneration, and stewardship of the planet.
Well, and a lot of it is that I was writing papers all along. I have over 100 papers published in the scientific literature, all kinds of reviews and books and things like that. And so that was really the first time that many of these people had ever heard that these organisms in the soil have a different function than causing disease. It was the absolute opposite. And so, as good scientists should, they weren't sure that I was doing everything just perfectly. So they repeated the experiments. And then, of course, they published them. And right at first, we had people who neglected to read the part about making compost and doing it right. If you do it right, you only have to turn the pile 3 times. It's ready to go in 21 days, maybe 28 days, if it's you're not quite right on with the temperatures or something. And you only grow the beneficial organisms in that compost. And so now you can put out on your property either the solid form of that compost or a liquid form of that compost. And so, it's depends on how bad off your soil is, how much has the total microbial world been destroyed. Well, then you may have to put out 2 or 3 applications of the biology to get them established around the root systems of the plants. If you were only partly nasty to your organisms and you had at least some, you could put on 50% of what we recommend and still end up with far more yield with far higher concentrations of nutrients. Really good seed set, if that's what you're going after, is the seed. So you can reduce, all of the cost of buying inorganic fertilizers, buying the toxic chemicals, having to put them out into the field on big tractors that compact the soil and reduce the yield of your plants because you just crushed a really important part of that plant. Oh yeah, roots. If they're not alive and functioning, if they've been not going to get much nutrient out of that. So yeah, I can go on and on.
Well, I'd love to ask you also, Elaine. Clearly, a lot of your work is centered around commercial agricultural production. And there's a context here that is so important, in my opinion, for all of humanity to be aware of. I know a lot of our Y on Earth community podcast audience is aware of this, but not everybody. And I would like, if you would, to have you walk us through what's going on in this relationship between healthy soil and balanced climate and the water hydrologic cycle. And of course, you mentioned earlier the pollution issue of inorganic inputs running off and collecting and concentrating in rivers. And we know that we end up with dead zones in many of the major river deltas around the world as a result of this, hypoxic zones. Can you, stepping back just a bit from the food production piece, which is obviously important, and the nutrition piece, can you help us understand how soil is so central to basically the homeostasis of our entire planet?
Without the microorganisms in the soil, if you don't go through the process of succession, you start out at where not a lot of anything but bacteria are present, in that just after catastrophic something has happened and bacteria will be the only thing left. Now you need to get some fungi in there, and as you do that, you change the plants that will grow in that system. So think of that early successional stage where you just have bacteria. That's weedland. That's all you're going to be growing in there. And the more you put out a toxic chemical, the more you keep that system in that stage of succession. You're only going to be growing weeds, and nobody likes you. So you've got to get those fungi back into the soil. And so now you've upped the concentration of fungi. So you're still bacterial dominated. So this hand is bacteria, this hand is fungi, but at least you got some fungi in here. And so now you start growing things like herbs, very early successional plants. They will do a lot towards moving you in the right direction. So with the next stage moving along, you get a little more fungi growing in that system. And now we've got more of the vegetables, things like that. Earlier succession lettuces, squash, so those sorts of plants. As you keep on the exudates that are being produced, the dead organic material that is falling to the surface of the soil, we don't take them away. We just make sure that the fungi are growing on that material. And so now we're getting more of a, slightly like a 0.75 ratio of fungi to bacteria. And then you grow bumper crops of tomatoes that taste imaginably delicious. It's got, I hate a tomato that when I eat it, it kind of, all the juices drip down your chin. That's not a really good tomato to me. I want something that's filled with deliciousness. So corn, the same thing. Wheat, barley, all the perennial grasses. Equal biomass of bacteria to fungi, please. And you get rid of diseases and pests and all of that. Now keep going, because more of the organic material that's being produced grows fungi instead of bacteria. So now we're growing shrubs. You want blueberries, you want blackberries, you want, and there are ways of getting rid of Himalayan blackberries if you understand what's going on under in the soil. And so sooner or later, they'll keep getting more and more fungal, and deciduous trees start. There's a succession within deciduous trees. So from the youngest deciduous tree to the oldest, you can really tell where in succession your system is because of that ratio of fungi to bacteria. And you see it reiterated in the plants that are growing in that system. But you don't have to wait for a year for the next harvest to figure out if you're doing anything good with the microorganisms. If you know what those balances are, then you're going to know right now that something's not right in there and I've got to fix it. Or everything's A-okay. I can just turn around and walk away and go golfing for, the next 3 weeks. Or whatever else, playing, going sailing or go whatever. So the last step in succession are the conifers. And when you get through that conifer set of, and we're making more and more, moving from one, again, you start with the least complex conifer, and they set the stage to grow the next kind of conifer, which is more dependent on fungi. And then the next one and the next one, sequoia, for example, or, some of the ancient forests that where, the tree is 20 people holding arms is extended as far as they can. And that's one single tree. Imagine how much carbon it's got stored in its, in the tissues of that plant. Just amazing. You can tell exactly where you are. Now, what if you're into landscapes? Well, really, growing a plant is very similar, no matter where you are. So in that particular situation, you want to grow, well, you got to figure out what you want to grow. I want to grow a palm tree right next to something that is only found on the edge of that shift from weeds into, beautiful flowers of some kind or another. Well, you can do that. You just have to make sure that where the palm trees are, you're at about a 5-to-1 ratio of fungi to bacteria. So that will keep the palm trees happy and healthy. So you put down compost that really pushes the fungal biomass that you fed a lot of woody components. And then as you move over here where you want these early successional pretty flowers and such, you make sure that the fungal to bacterial biomass ratio is about 1,000, put it the right way, is about a 0.01 fungi biomass as compared to 6,000 micrograms of bacterial biomass. And so you select for the plant that you want. You select for the fact that they will not attract diseases and pests. All of these plants will be building structure within their soil. And we got to hold on to those materials. We don't ever want to let them run down the hill. My soil is all going downhill. Well, don't you think you have to stop that? How do you hold things in place? Bacteria and fungi, protozoa and nematodes. So get that out on all of these spaces that you don't want things to, and it's like when I drive through Colorado in the springtime and it's pouring rain, and you just watch all of the soil in that field just going that way and causing trouble trying to convert the water that's in the river into something that's drinkable. You got to sieve it out. You got to, look for toxic chemicals. You got to put chlorine in there. How many of you really want to be drinking chlorine your whole entire life? And yet has anybody? No, we're not going down that track. How do you prevent having to go that way? You run everything through something that is basically compost that will take up all of these toxic chemicals and convert them into something that is not toxic. And every toxic material that has been here for longer than maybe 30, 40 years, we know what microorganisms can decompose those materials. The problem is that we've got an industry that is every year inventing new toxic chemicals because we can't kill the aphids that are being selected by the very fact we're applying toxic chemicals on top of it. Its DNA can shuffle very rapidly, and now start putting out something that means that stuff. I'm not that. My mom and my dad were affected by that stuff, but I am part of the new aphid community, and I have resistance. Nanner, nanner, nanner. And it's like, why are we putting money into that when we could just get our compost out there, run everything through a compost pile? When that compost has taken up as much of the toxic chemical as it can, we take that tank and dump it out, fill it up with new compost, and now we spray some more organic material in that pile where we filled up the capacity, and you're just constantly moving the compost around, and you have somebody who makes compost from fresh waste material coming from our cities, from our villages and our towns. We don't need to have here in Oregon, here in Corvallis, you go north of the city and there's this mountain, a literal mountain of waste material that, they cover it up every year. You don't know that you're dealing with layers and layers and layers and layers, but they don't manage things correctly and get the right kinds of organisms to pull those toxic organic materials out. And all of those toxic chemicals are moving out into the valley where people live, and they're expected to not complain when they have problems. It's insanity. We need to be getting these organisms back into the soil so you can grow big trees. So, all the stages of succession from the last time catastrophic disturbances happened, you can improve the ability to hold on to carbon. For the organism that holds more of the carbon are actually fungi. Fungi grow as tubes, so think of a long tube growing through the soil. All of the surfaces can collect nutrients and foods that fungal hypha can use. Here at the tip, it's just kind of a rounded end That's where most of the uptake of nutrients occurs. And as those enzymes start working, lots of carbon dioxide are being released that the plant doesn't need. Just like bacteria. Bacteria, when they're growing and utilizing those materials, they have to have a carbon to nitrogen ratio of 5. So 5 carbons, that's not very many for every 1 nitrogen. But when you look at fungi, it's 30 to 1,000 units of carbon for every 1 nitrogen. So the fungus lays down almost like a fat layer around the inside of that tube. And so the first year or two that fungal hypha is alive and active, it puts out, it's got small rings. Well, the next year it puts down more, and the next year it puts down more, and the next year it puts down more, and the next year it puts down more. So there's just one very small tube running information from back and forth through that whole length. And the fungus moves, and this, further down the length where this wasn't around, this tubing wasn't around when it made that tubing. But now this is where the carbon is going. So we can hold massive quantities of carbon in the soil. And that's exactly what was going on in the Great Plains of the United States. Those were fungal dominated systems, just, sucking up the carbon, putting it into the soil where it belongs. And so all that elevated carbon in the atmosphere, where did it come from? It came from killing the fungi. Oh yeah, and the bacteria and the fungi and protozoa and nematodes are all have their portions, but fungi are the most important in holding on to carbon and keeping it in place. It's one of the things that we go, Mother Nature planned on having most ecosystems be forest. And that cools the soil in that area where all the heat is hitting leaves way up here. And so you don't have those hot instances. You're just growing more plants. And whether you want to be growing, shrubs, or whether you want to be growing Florida with the oranges, or you want to be growing bananas or cotton or anything else, you're holding the heat away from the surface of the soil. So there's the whole system. You want to be doing landscape stuff. Well, we better, if you're putting out grass through a great deal of your landscape, you have to stop putting toxic chemicals on it. Mm-hmm. You've got to be growing those plants that get you to the beautiful grasses that are typically perennial. Okay, you mow them down. Well, why couldn't you bring some sheep in there and let somebody else who owns the sheep herd, come in, let them eat, and they go on to the next place? Why do we have to have lawnmowers going back and forth and picking up all and taking it to the dump and making a problem in the dump?
Well, and I know the carbon piece of this is so important for the atmospheric climatic balancing. And of course, when we send our organic resources to landfill, they often go anaerobic at that point, releasing methane into the atmosphere, which is an even more potent greenhouse gas than other forms like CO2. So we've got, not only are we're sort of piling on a number of adverse behaviors and consequences, when in fact, there's this whole other virtuous pathway with composting, et cetera, that is relatively easy for us all to adopt at varying scales, that actually yields multiple layered benefits and avoids the multiple layered detriments that we are currently seeing so widespread around the world.
Yep. It's like, if you think back in the centuries of time, the whole Middle East was a forest.
Yeah.
What happened to it? It's called goats because that was their herding animal. It could tolerate, as time went by, they can tolerate fairly dry conditions. But put a cow out there, put a horse out there, sorry, they're not going to be able to thrive and deal with it. So we know that the Sahara Desert is expanding at an incredible rate, something like 20 miles every year in every direction. We should very easily be able to put back that forest system, but you're going to have to make the connection to some source of cheap compost. And so send all your waste stuff to the Sahara Desert where we can compost it and put that back into the system. And within a couple of years, we can have perennial grasses. We can start having shrubbery. We can start growing trees in 10, 20 years, and really we should have started on this 50 years ago.
Yeah.
But we're just, oh, well, it's, we don't like those people over there very much, so we're just going to ignore their problems. Nope. Any problem they're suffering will soon enough become your problem. So get off the high horse and get out there and solve the problems before they're in your backyard.
Mm. Mm. So wise, sage advice.
Now, if someone would just listen.
Well, I know we've got some folks listening to us to this discussion. Let me take the opportunity to remind folks that this is the Y on Earth Community Podcast, and I'm your host, Aaron William Perry. Today, we're visiting with Dr. Elaine Ingham, the founder and president of Soil Food Web. And you can connect with Elaine at soilfoodweb.com, the website, and you can sign up for a variety of course offerings there, from very simple introductory to multi-week long comprehensive instructional and educational courses. You can also connect with her and her team on Instagram at Soil Food Web School, and they have a YouTube channel. We'll include the link to that in the show notes as well. I want to be sure to thank the handful of ambassadors, members, and sponsoring companies that make our podcast series possible, as well as our broader regeneration renaissance work. And this includes Chelsea Green Publishing, Waylay Waters Hemp-Infused Aromatherapy Soaking Salts, Profitable Purpose Consulting, working with so many B-certified companies, Earth Coast Productions, doing media production for mission-driven companies as well, Patagonia, Dr. Bronner's, and our Y on Earth's very own Soil Works biodynamic preparation for your garden, yard, small farm. Want to mention also that our ambassadors are instrumental in all the work we're doing, and many of our ambassadors and members are part of our monthly giving program. If you'd like to join the monthly giving program, go to yonearth.org, click on the donate button, and select whatever level works best for you. If you want to give at the $33 level, we'll happily send you a jar of the Waylay Waters soaking salts each month as a thank you. And now in 2024, we also have a Patreon page. So for folks who like to sign up and support through Patreon, you'll see we've got a number of levels and a bunch of wonderful goodies and offerings available for you there as well. So yeah, thanks to so many. And Elaine, I want to get back to a specific detail. I want to make sure I write this down correctly in my notes, and then I want to ask you about the tubes and the communication in the fungal bodies. First, the detail. You mentioned a carbon to nitrogen ratio in the bacteria of 5:1, and then you mentioned the ratio for the fungi, but I didn't catch the ratio.
It can be as low as 30 carbons for every 1 nitrogen, all the way to 3,000
Wow.
carbon per nitrogen. So you can see how it fungi of different kinds can get into every place and start working at any level of of our successional process. Now, it's not going to be the same species that will grow all the way through, but that's some of the joy of what Mother Nature does. All these different species, we have to know which ones are most appropriate for very early successional. They can fight pretty well. They're going to build structure in the soil, like, just amazingly how fast they can grow that, to the next level, all the way up to the forest, the sequoia forest. Yeah.
Amazing, so beautiful. Well, your description of the tubular structure of fungi hyphae made me think of neural nets, of fiber optics that we use for our internet connectivity with our technology. Of course, we've heard of terms like the Wood Wide Web. There's this extraordinary communication network in the soil. Is this right? Can you tell us? Can you tell us about this? What's going on?
Yeah, the plant is probably pretty much in control of which kinds of organisms will be doing different kinds of jobs. And it just depends on the kinds of foods that those plants are putting out. So you can see where if we get a diversity of the low growing surface of the soil protectors. So when that drop of water that comes, well, think about a drop of water coming from a cloud that's 5 miles up. Acceleration due to gravity. What's the energy released when that drop of water hits the surface of your soil? Compacts it completely. If you got bare soil, you're in trouble. So because all of that compacted material is very easily washed away. What else? Where's that water going to go? And it's going to go downhill. Well, where do you want to stop its downhill movement? It's right here where the nutrients are still in place, where the fungi are already growing, are already going to these root systems and saying, hey, what you want? Over here to this root system, what you want, babe? Over here, what do you want? All the different species and they're all, and if the fungus gets really, pushed away, the fungus is going to probably make that part of that ecosystem unavailable to the plant that didn't follow directions. Well, that was a weed. And so the fungus is trying to increase the concentration of fungi, pull all of the nitrogen out of the soil and make life bad for that weedy species. So there's, all of these things that we like to teach people because it's just amazing. All the different things that go on in the soil. We've had somebody all in the food web picture looking at all the interactions between all the different kinds of species that are present, the plant species as well as the bacterial species, the fungal species, the protozoan, all of them. And it's something well over 60,000 interactions in that food web going on all the time. Whereas you go back to something where there's just weeds, cut that in, and drop it by 100-fold. Go back to that where you've only got moss and lichens, perhaps, and way lower. So it's just it's got to be a work of beauty to excuse me, go into that old growth forest and think about all the things going on in that forest. Just mind-boggling. It's got to be in the millions of interactions per all of those organisms on an hourly basis. So that's a part that an understanding of really biomes and what all is going on in that biome. And how do you get rid of things that would not enhance movement along in that successional process? Because we got to know those things too. Because we want the biome. We don't want it to keep growing and become an old growth forest if what you really need is a golf course or some blueberries or a beautiful landscape for looking at your property. So we've got to have we know what we're doing, hopefully, or we think we know what we're doing for most of the time anymore, and trying to here's what the recipe is for around your house and around your garden, and it's a lot like a permaculture situation. They've been mapping out how do you want your landscape to look? Well, I want my garden over here. I want these kinds of vegetables. I want turn it into something beautiful. It doesn't have to be in rows all the time. That's what we do in agriculture because we are paying for that land. And so we have to make as much money as we possibly can. That's why it's perhaps not as beautiful as it could be. Turn all that grass into something else more edible for human beings. At the same time as making sure it's beautiful.
More edible landscapes.
Mm-hmm.
Beautiful. Well, this is such a joy, Elaine, to have this opportunity to visit with you and to have you on our podcast. And of course, after we wrap up our main interview, we're going to get a few additional minutes with you in our behind the scenes segment, which is made available exclusively to our ambassador network. And folks, if you haven't yet joined our ambassador network and you would like to, just go to wyatearth.org and there's a page called Become an Ambassador. Very easy process. And one of the benefits of being an ambassador, in addition to joining our monthly Zoom meetups with folks from around the world, is that you have access to our ambassador resources page with all kinds of video recordings, including behind the scenes segments with our podcast guests. And we'll pick up behind the scenes. I think I might pick up on that chlorine comment you were choosing to steer away from earlier, Elaine. But I want to ask, to wrap up our interview, you have this amazing way of voicing Mother Nature's way of being, and in many respects right now, what she needs. And we like to say with the Why on Earth Community Podcast, we are amplifying voices. And to me, Elaine, you very much represent the wisdom, the knowledge of Gaia, of Mother Earth. And with that in mind, I want to ask you, speaking to our audience and to folks all around the world, what do you think we can be doing as individual people in communities and as a species? What can we be doing to help clean this mess up as quickly as possible and to help bring healing and balance back into our world?
It's another big order, isn't it? I think for me, it's just continuing to do what I'm already doing, is bringing knowledge to people and getting them aware that they don't have to sit back and mope and just be unhappy about what life is doing to them, and all of the things we've been pouring into our bodies that are now causing things like Alzheimer's or Parkinson's, or not being able to move your joints without excruciating pain. All of that comes from the food we eat. And if the food you're eating is chock full of toxic chemicals, well, surprise, how could you expect any less? So what do we do to make certain that the food you're feeding yourself and your families have no chemicals in it? Grow your plants, whatever you want to grow, from something that's landscape and looks beautiful, but you can eat all those blueberries. You can eat the strawberries we put under the ground. Well, but then over here we have gladiolas and we got tulips and we've got, you can have both. when you're in small scale? Now for your family. Well, when we're in agricultural systems, we've got to go after one crop and maximize the amount of yield that we're getting, the nutrient content in there. The water isn't being stolen away from your plant. So you're getting just the water that you got in the springtime is more than adequate as the amount of water that your plant's going to need through the whole growing system if you can get those root systems down into the soil. So if a corn plant can get down 25 feet, how far down into the soil can an old growth forest tree go? So we're looking at something that's well over, I think the last time somebody, dug it all the way out, 250 feet into the ground. That's how deep. So think of the water that's available, the nutrients that are available to them. So we've got to get back to what nature put together to begin with. And it's kind of like go back to the Green Revolution and how we're going to save agriculture because now we can grow the plants we want. And we'll know how much because we can put in the right amount of nitrogen. Well, that hasn't exactly worked out. They don't really know what they're doing still, but they've made it such that you send your soil sample in, it gets assessed, and you're told how much of this and how much of that and how much of this other thing. And you look at the price tags on per acre, it's just, someone just quoted to me yesterday that we look at the amount of nutrients going on increases every year. And then every year, the price tag. And last year, the inorganic fertilizers went up something like 600% increase.
Wow.
So how is the average general person in the United States or elsewhere, how are they going to be able to afford food? And it's chock full of diseases, chock full of toxic chemicals that's going to harm your ability to resist diseases when disease comes by. You're going to catch it because you don't have any more, you don't have the defenses anymore. We got to turn that around. What's the quickest way to get this information across to everybody? Well, right now it's doing these kinds of podcasts, bringing together those people so that they can understand. It's not just, the lab told me that I had to put on this much nitrogen. Understand how the soil works, understand how water works, and that we can clean up any amount of nasty, toxic material that's in that water. So that's going to be a little harder to achieve because it's going to take more land area to be able to do that, but it is possible. And because I've talked about this over the last 10 years, there's a whole bunch more people looking at these kinds of situations. They're already there testing and seeing what they have to add in order to get rid of those toxic chemicals.
Absolutely wonderful to hear all of that. And Elaine, I want to just encourage folks once again to go to soilfoodweb.com, take at least the intro course, if not the full suite that includes the 6-week program. Elaine, it is such a joy and honor to have you on the podcast. Thank you so much for spending some time with me and with us today. And before we transition to behind the scenes, if there's anything else you'd like to say to our audience, please, the floor is yours.
What I'd like to say is a comment that follows. Everything we do is virtual. So you don't have to come to Corvallis and live in Corvallis for 6 weeks. Nope, you download the next class and you work through that and you take the test. And we are really trying hard to only ask about the points that have to be understood in that first class. And then once you have managed to get through that, then you apply for the second class, and so the FC2, Foundation Course 2, and you go through that, which is the how to make really good compost, going through all the details. And it depends on where in the world you are, exactly which recipe of types of plants go in there. But the overarching principle is really pretty simple to convey. So you learn that pretty rapidly. Then we would hope you would start collecting your starting materials to make your own compost pile. And then FC3 is how to make extracts and teas and why you would apply one or the other. Then the next one is to teach you to look through a microscope, because it gives you instant knowledge on what's going wrong, or it's giving you instant knowledge that you've done everything just perfect. Pat yourself on your back. Very good. And then we get into real, how do you report things? How do you put them, turn those things you've been looking at, learning what they are. So we have a whole microscope. What does a protozoan look like? What does a cercozoa look like? What does, any one of these wonderful critters in the soil? You don't have to identify them to genus and species. That comes 20 years from now. We're not ready for that yet. We'll get there in knowing absolutely what species of bacteria, fungi, or protozoa is needed right now for this plant growing under these conditions. We're not there yet, but I think people will see the light and get working on that a little bit faster. We have advanced courses. So, if you want to be a consultant and you want to start bringing this knowledge to other people, and that's a huge part of what we're doing right now overseas. This information is just, they're just, this is amazing that these things are known and understood. And so we get that information to them and they can turn right around. No more pesticides, no more inorganic fertilizers. The things that they do are very much things that, in some cases, you were talking earlier about what's their name? That group. And it doesn't matter if you're, gosh.
Which group? I'm trying to think of who you were talking about. The not soil works.
No, a little bit more general. It's like organic growers. There's regenerative. There's starts with a B.
Biodynamic.
There we go.
Okay.
So we try to understand with everybody who's producing things under slightly different conditions for maybe slightly different things. How much can you kind of not do exactly what we tell you to do, but close? And most of the people making compost are following, they're close. We'd like to get them to understand that with a little more understanding of what they're doing, they would get even better results. Mm-hmm. And so we want to see that maximized because we want to feed the world. We don't want to have to go back to some of the agriculture has to be toxic chemical in order to feed enough people. Well, no, we increase yields, typically at least 20% increase in productivity. We'll have a 20 or 30% increase in the major nutrients in the plant. So you're getting double both of those. But as we get people who really understand how to make the compost in our own studies and things, it's not just 20% increase. Much of the time, most of the time, people can reach at least 100% increase in yield. People really are getting it down and everything's going just fine. We have gotten yields 3,000% increase in yield. So it depends on where you are, how much you've understood, how much practice. So come and work with us and get it figured out. And you go home and you teach everybody else.
Simple as that. I absolutely love it. Thank you so much, Elaine. What a joy to visit with you.
Well, I enjoy giving these talks, and I look forward to working with you more.
Absolutely. Likewise. Bye-bye.
Ciao.
The Why on Earth Community Stewardship and Sustainability podcast series is hosted by Aaron William Perry, author, thought leader, and executive consultant. The podcast and video recordings are made possible by the generous support of people like you. To sign up as a daily, weekly, or monthly supporter, please visit whyonearth.org/support. Support packages start at just $1 per month. The podcast series is also sponsored by several corporate and organization sponsors. You can get discounts on their products and services using the code WHYONEARTH, all one word with a Y. These sponsors are listed on the whyonearth.org/support page. If you found this particular podcast episode especially insightful, informative, or inspiring, please pass it on and share it with a friend whom you think will also enjoy it. Thank you for tuning in. Thank you for your support. And thank you for being a part of the Why on Earth community.